For all of recorded history, the powers that be have created locations with the express purpose of influencing society. Based on the concern that the average person is unable to handle the whole truth, these places, particularly in the United States, are shielding from prying eyes, often bringing their own to the highest positions of government to preserve them. That, or they're used to do the exact opposite, created to hide greater ambitions that challenge the status quo. Today, we'll shine a light on what defines a secret site, the reasons they exist in the first place, the entities that gave them strength, what they've done to change the world around us, and some of the greatest revelations that made the world start paying attention. The one thing to keep in mind is that secret sites are nothing without the secret societies that form them. Clubs, agencies, and even religious organizations that do everything possible to hide the rituals and traditions that give them the tools for global dominance. Before the US was even a thought, there were aggregates all over the world that contributed to the many bases of secrecy we know today. On top of that, many argue what is required from a society and its locations to consider it secret. The characteristics most investigators agree on are as follows. 1. The people involved deny being a part of the organization in question. They refuse to acknowledge that they have even the slightest bit of knowledge regarding the issue. 2. Classified information is either stored or exchanged within the confines of the organization. This information could be their own, or it could belong to someone else to be used for future conflict. And third, there are vows, and often ritualistic behaviors that initiate and bind those overseeing the organization together. These are used not only to verify involvement or membership, but to ensure that the location and its people have a shared culture. Although it may seem like a stretch, secret societies and the groups that created them probably date back further than 30,000 BCE. One of these cases involves the Chauvet cave paintings in France, where ancient peoples used its walls to keep the history of their travels. Some scientists believe that the spray-shaped signs indicated the earliest documentation of volcanic events. It was a way of preserving the experiences in a location unlikely to be damaged by climate and hostile neighbors. Passing forward to 2500 BCE, a prehistoric monument erected on Salisbury Plain called Stonehenge was indicative of how societies began using sites to shape society. It wasn't as secret as the sites we often see today, but a growing collection of evidence suggests that powerful leaders could have used this anomaly to coalesce and bring an end to the hunter-gatherer way of life. As you move closer to the current day, it becomes clear that many secret sites began evolving to have cult-like attributes. Many of the oldest secret sites were underground spiritual centers that bonded families and clans. In ancient Greece, there were groups like the followers of Dionysus who would meet to celebrate graphic rituals and recite poems or hymns. Over time, these small activities would be adopted by city-states, acting as catalysts for unity and the promise of future political success. We know this because of the many archaeological findings that have taken place since. An example would be an excavation of a sanctuary in Thebes, where the structures indicate a need for control over foot traffic, most likely for sacrificial ceremonies and initiations circa 500 to 450 BCE. Wealthy Roman patrons would often fund such events in order to strengthen bonds with other ambitious parties. In South America, one only needs to look at the Mayan practice of astronomy, a practice heavily guarded in locations like Xochicalco. Albeit not considered an exclusively Mayan city, it certainly had Mayan influence. These temples were some of the original secret sites in the region, where only the best scholars, priesthood, and highest elites were told about the secrets of the solar system. Sources indicate that the Maya painstakingly recorded the movements of Venus and determined that its year, relative to Earth, not the Sun, was 584 days long, amazingly close to the 583.92 days that modern science has determined. They kept this knowledge from the people, using their findings to organize massive military expeditions, as well as determine the most appropriate time for royal succession. All of this may seem bizarre, but the historical development of secret societies and their locations has made a clear impact on how more modern ones function, even in the US. The reason for describing the evolution of secret keeping across the world is to make one thing abundantly clear. The greatest powers in world history have created secret sites that often change hands to protect information that they believe the public can't handle. And the United States, although quite young, has very much inherited this responsibility over the last 200 years. As the time span suggests, this has been a slow and complex process. As described when referring to Greco-Roman cults, people with tremendous political influence nurtured the most sophisticated groups with the best track record for storing important information. There are many trusted groups that were assigned these responsibilities, one of them being the Freemasons, who can trace their lineage back to merchants and stoneworkers of the Middle Ages. In 1717, they constructed their first real secret site, the First Grand Lodge. Over time, there was a great schism that separated the organization. Many Freemasons abstained from doing anything political, but this by no means prevented Masons from rising to power. Some presidents have been a part of this organization, including Garfield, William McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Warren G. Harding, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Harry S. Truman. Again, many will argue that memberships for Freemasonry or a society like the Skull and Bones are meant to celebrate simple fraternal traditions. However, when one takes a deeper look at these gentlemen's clubs, they tend to, whether deliberately or coincidentally, act as a precursor for an eventual corporatized bureaucratic takeover. Now, this begs the question, why are secret sites necessary once power is secure? The secret sites in the US are often well known. We're able to drive up close and speculate about what goes on the inside, however, that's usually where it stops. We are almost never made aware of how the sausage gets made, and we begin to create conspiracies and legends surrounding them. In some cases, this secrecy has proven to poison the well. An obvious example would be Little St. James, a small private island owned by none other than Jeffrey Epstein from 1998 until his death in 2019. Although not formally owned by a government entity, the location was revealed to be a hotspot for elites in American society. People like David Copperfield, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, and Stephen Hawking made mysterious visits to a location riddled with heinous criminal activity. For 20 years, it was a hedonistic playground, protected by some of the most influential figures in the modern era. These US sites, federal or private, have been held under a microscope lately. Bureaucratic entities like the FBI or CIA have been declassifying documents in recent years, revealing some of the most startling actions, like FDR's order to target ethnic minorities during the Second World War, or an investigation into the death of Adolf Hitler, that have left many questioning if these secret sites are democratic strongholds or skeleton-filled closets used to help the most corrupt people stay in power. This growing concern has led many to actively investigate some of the US's most heavily guarded secret sites. These are some of the more notable discoveries. The first secret site of note was born out of the nation's interest in atomic weaponry. Given the codename the Manhattan Project, a series of private experiments took place in Los Alamos, New Mexico, triggered by the fear that Germany was developing nuclear technology since the 1930s. On July 16, 1945, Project Director J. Robert Oppenheimer conducted the first real successful detonation in the Trinity test site at the Alamogordo bombing and gunnery range 230 miles south of Los Alamos. The site was so secret that the operation was even kept secret from local authorities. That said, there were close calls, such as when Kenneth Greeson, a physicist working on the classified expedition, was pulled over for speeding in Albuquerque while he was driving detonators to Trinity 4 days before the test. Ultimately, the Trinity test site served as the first stage of introducing the world to nuclear warfare. The once secret site is now part of the White Sands Missile Range and is owned by the U.S. Department of Defense. There are still remnants from the original blast fenced in at Ground Zero. Next, we have Camp Perry, also known as the Farm in some circles. Like Trinity, the 9,275-acre tract was used for a variety of operations, including Navy construction battalions, or Seabees, but many reports suggest that the camp started housing German POWs by 1944. The Virginia General Assembly fought to return the land to former residents, but this prompted the Navy to swoop in, eliminating the possibility of restoration. Aerial photographs show that the land possesses a mock prison, a private airstrip, and a firing range. There have been several accounts published in CIA bestsellers describing covert spy training as well. It's thought that this is one of the few places where government infiltration was actually a specified part of the curriculum. It's quite possible that the men who received training in these locations went on to destabilize the political fabric of enemy nations, allowing for coups in the hopes of installing puppet leadership to be controlled by the US government. There's also North Brother Island, New York, which saw its first hospital in the 1880s. It became a service center for contagious diseases, and there are a number of tales addressing over 1 million deaths, all of them unnamed. For 3 years, officials in the area looked after an Irish cook who would go on to be notoriously called Typhoid Mary. After release from the North Brother Island facility, she was told to never cook again, as this was apparently the cause of her spreading such a deadly disease. After another 5 years passed, she was found cooking again in a hospital and discovered to have neglected basic hygiene, refusing to wash her hands while handling food. Sloan Maternity Hospital had a major typhoid outbreak leading to more than 20 people contracting the illness. This secret site might not have been intentionally spreading disease, but its secrecy led to the deaths of countless people. Since then, the island has been essentially abandoned, and some believe that it served as a mass burial ground during the coronavirus outbreak. Located in Virginia, Mount Weather is also a site shrouded in enough mystery to inspire many references in pop culture, such as the 2002 film The Sum of All Fears, where the actor playing the president is shown the rehearsal of an emergency operation following a Russian nuclear attack. In real life, it serves as a center of operations for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. Back in 1961 and 1963, Mount Weather was presented as one of the possible key players who held serious power in the wake of the Cuban Missile Crisis and JFK's assassination. There are many operations that the public is aware of, including the Virginia National Processing Center, the Disaster Finance Center, and the Agency Logistics Center. However, there is much that goes on in the 600,000 to 700,000 square foot underground space, at least nothing beyond the vague answers provided by people who work there. One of these happens to be the Continuity of Operations Plan, or COOP, which was activated hours after the attacks on September 11th, and since that time, these unknown individuals have been serving in rotations lasting up to 3 months in Raven Rock and Mount Weather. All 4 of these sites are some of the early examples of what has gone on to be a vast intelligence network. Believe it or not though, these don't hold a candle up to other sites guarding the nation's as well as its people's greatest secrets. Starting with a site not connected to the US government, Hawaii's Forbidden Island, or Niihau. There are a lot of fun facts to be extracted from this location. Roughly 18.6 miles long and 6.2 miles wide, Niihau earned its nickname in the 1950s when polio ravaged the population. At the time, you had to be given a doctor's note to enter the territory. It has no paved roads, no telephone service, plumbing, running water, or any electrical grid. According to a 2010 census, only 170 people inhabit the island year-round. The family who owns the island, the Robinsons, purchased the island during the 19th century with a contractual obligation to preserve its culture in perpetuity. A majority of the population makes a living at the Robinson farm, with the remaining populace surviving on welfare. It's also the only island standing where Hawaiian remains the primary language. English is the obvious second, but it's reportedly unpopular among the citizenry. Although some tourism is accepted, it's heavily restricted, and much of the island remains a bit of a mystery. This secret site is quite possibly the greatest example of cultural preservation in the United States, and there are no indications that this will change anytime soon. The next site on the list is Granite Mountain, located in Salt Lake City, Utah. As stated previously, many secret sites start with a spiritual goal, and this hidden vault 1 mile up Little Cottonwood Canyon is no exception. In 1965, it was constructed with the express purpose of preserving and protecting important information owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. According to those fortunate enough to get a peek at the operation, it holds the largest collection of family history information in the region. The 65,000 square foot excavation project is one of the most secure secret sites in the developed world, owning its own internal water reservoir and gates capable of withstanding almost any kind of natural disaster, including a nuclear blast. In many ways, Granite Mountain is a nearly invincible monument to the LDS's capacity for storing confidential information that will likely outlast humanity itself. Up next is P.O. Box 1142, one of the most secret intelligence bases in US history. Like most secret sites in the States, 1142 was raised in response to the Nazi threat during World War II as a highly classified military intelligence installation tasked with training outbound spies, as well as interrogating some of the most high-profile German POWs. The center's mailing address in Alexandria, Virginia had 87 temporary and permanent structures, which conducted at least 3 different secret programs. Temporary detention for the above-mentioned POWs under the direction of the U.S. Army's Military Intelligence Service, or MIS, coordinated instructions for escape and evasion, or E&E, along with devices to help if facing capture, for special servicemen, and the third specifically used for services related to intelligence research. Here, Army personnel were trained in counterintelligence and psychology. Some of these men were Jews who escaped the Third Reich. To this day, their reportedly non-violent tactics are still seen as the gold standard for interrogation. E&E was modeled after a British operation that served a similar purpose. One of their famous operations involved creating 2 fictitious prisoner relief organizations and used their names to send care packages to the POW camps. The packages only acted as a cover for smuggling vital materials. According to NPS.gov, the E&E program succeeded in hiding compasses, tissue paper maps, counterfeit German currency, radios, and similar items in those packages. By 1944, the E&E program was sending between 80 and 120 packages each day to German POW camps. The final known branch of operations was somewhat self-explanatory and included materials documenting the identity of German military units based on their members' arm patches or insignia, the organizational structure of such units, and the commanders of each unit. It was important in the planning for D-Day on June 6, 1944. P.O. Box 1142 became a precious asset up until the end of the Cold War, and its existence would only be made public in the 2000s. While this site appears to present the US government in a good light, as stated earlier, there are always 2 sides to a coin. Although not technically an official secret site, the African country of Liberia deserves a place on this list. More specifically, an address known as 80 Broad Street, but the actual building is located miles away. To some extent, the country's existence was a congressional invention, its origins being traced back to a bipartisan effort between abolitionist and pro-slavery leadership. It planted its roots in what is a prototypical colony port city called Monrovia, named after James Monroe. The original belief was that it might become a haven for freed slaves, but its independence saw that the growing native power ironically facilitated a slavery system of its own. A century after its inception, the country of Liberia still had strong ties to the United States, and Edward Stettinius Jr., a UN diplomat and former Secretary of State to Harry S. Truman, who saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to use one of their key ports as a trade mechanism that would eventually be known as the Liberian Registry. In recent decades, the Liberian flag has become the second most common flag on freighters, some of which transport goods that are in direct violation of UN sanctions. Today, it's perhaps the primary example of the unity between corporations, who wish to conceal trade secrets from their own government. The funny part about this is that it wouldn't have existed without government funding. Speaking of which, this next site is arguably where many positions of power in the US are made. Just like in the days of the followers of Dionysus, humanity has not strayed far from utilizing spirituality and provocative symbolism to bring people together. The greatest modern example of this would have to be Bohemian Grove. In 1872, an aggregation of male artists, lawyers, actors, journalists, and fiction writers formed an elitist group called the Bohemian Club. Since its creation, the growth has been staggering, but has only welcomed those in the highest positions of the American aristocracy. This campground at 20601 Bohemian Avenue was raised 6 years after the club's founding to say goodbye to an actor leaving for New York City, and has been the only spot used since, spanning about 2,700 acres. To some, this has been described as no more than an exclusive frat party where public urination and binge drinking occur. However, journalists later provided footage of some of the stranger activities, such as the cremation of care, where those present burn an effigy before a massive cement owl. Some controversial figures, like Alex Jones, believe this to be a symbol for Molech, a deity popularly known to accept child sacrifice. These claims, however, have not been proven. Regardless, the organization has been present for decades, with people such as Mark Twain, Ronald Reagan, Clint Eastwood, Henry Kissinger, Walter Cronkite, and Richard Nixon in attendance. It's a private representation of the widening chasm between the common people and those who lead them. Beyond the growth, some of these divisive places can be otherworldly. In 1955, the United States Air Force, or USAF, and the CIA acquired a site mainly for flight tests, one of them being the Lockheed U-2 aircraft. The military installation, now referred to as Area 51, is located at Groom Lake, which is how it received its actual name, the Groom Lake Base in southern Nevada. And over time, UFO sightings started to whip the public into a frenzy, many accusing the US of hiding possible alien technology and possibly even organic material from the public. Military personnel and engineers such as Bob Lazar have since come forward claiming that the base is used to hold onto and examine extraterrestrial technology. Lazar in particular has made almost prophetic claims, one of them being the discovery of Element 115, which would later go on to be discovered in 2003. Figures like Lazar are often being discredited though, as Lazar claims to have attended MIT with no record of his attendance available for verification. Many argue that this is the doing of US bureaucracies, who have gone to great lengths to keep the truth hidden. What's even weirder is that Tikaboo Peak, a part of Area 51 once observable via binoculars 26 miles away from White Sites or Freedom Ridge, is no longer able to be seen, and the government purchased both locations to prevent civilians from taking a look since 1995. Although the government has claimed that there was no evidence to support such accusations, they have made a few concessions, admitting that there have been UFO sightings in the area. However, they don't openly admit to dissecting aliens, dismantling aircraft, or other actions many have said to have witnessed since the secret site was founded. As time goes on, the American public will undoubtedly be told more about the US's most famous secret site, but there are no guarantees that the information will be satisfactory. With that in mind, there are secret sites that have proven to be total duds, places that were thought to be special but were revealed to be quite simple upon further investigation. The first example of such a site would be Plum Island, an 840-acre landmass off the coast of New York's Long Island. Home to the Plum Island Disease Center, conspiracy theorists didn't hesitate to propagate sinister tales involving illegal testing and possible bioweapons manufacturing. Back in the 1950s, Congress authorized the Department of Agriculture to occupy the territory as a testing facility to prevent deadly outbreaks of disease among livestock in the US. After reveals like Project Paperclip, a government-endorsed acquisition project to recruit Nazi scientists, many believed that Plum Island could be more than just a husbandry lab, suggesting that the US could be using the island to develop mutants under the guidance of sinister geneticists at the helm. After the announcement of an inevitable shutdown in 2023, much of the operations taking place on the island were publicized, and theories about mutant animals and humans, or sophisticated biological warfare tactics, were finally put to rest. There's also something to be said about the exaggerated horrors of Alcatraz. It started as a fort in 1850 under the guidance of President Millard Fillmore, but later became a part of the Bureau of Prisons in 1933. After assuming the role, many conspiracy theories orbited the site for decades. After all, many prisons have an element of secrecy, and Alcatraz's location off the coast of San Francisco welcomed wild amounts of speculation. There were stories of unethical experiments, cells filled to the brim with ultraviolent felons, and murders so horrifying that, after decades of activity, summoned the spirits of disgruntled victims, cursed to wander the halls reliving their trauma. In truth, the prison was never really full. Hollywood had painted a bleak picture of cells so packed that the men could barely lay down, but the highest number of prisoners reported to be in Alcatraz at one time was 320. Sometimes there were fewer than 230. Its single-cell occupancy and decent food actually compelled some criminals to request for a transfer. Even though a lot of people claim that it's haunted, the stories are almost never consistent. And although there was violence, sometimes resulting in death, many of the tales are exaggerated and are dwarfed by the brutality often seen in modern prisons all over the country. The next secret site, almost entirely fabricated by those who believe in it, is the Hollow Moon. On November 20th, 1969, the Apollo 12 launch vehicle was sent to the surface of the porous igneous mass. According to reports, the moon was said to have rung like a bell for some time after the impact. Since then, a pseudo-scientific hypothesis has circulated, claiming that the moon contains substantial interior space. Some have even gone on to believe that the discovery led to the construction of a secret site within the hollow space, or a potential discovery that's been kept from the public. Although the latter is the more believable option, it too can be disproven with further seismic analysis. These tests constrain the thickness of the moon's crust, mantle, and core, proving that the moon is indeed not hollow. Back on Earth, the most prominent debunked secret site or sites discussed revolve around the Bermuda Triangle. Some have even gone so far as to call it the Devil's Triangle, given the fact that the last century has seen the loss of small boats, ships, and aircraft mysteriously vanishing in the region. There are a few famous theories that are used to send the public into a state of mania. The world has created conspiracies ranging from aliens to a demonic gateway to explain why these people and their vessels went missing. When it comes to the US, there have been a number of accusations against the government, believing that they're experimenting with the fabric of space-time. And yet, we only need to take a look at an example to see that a Bermuda Triangle secret site is most likely non-existent. When Bruce Gernon Jr., a Floridian pilot, flew towards Bimini Island, he spotted an elliptical cloud, which he would later go on to dub electronic fog. He described it as follows: "The deeper we penetrated, the more intense the flashes became. So we made a 135-degree turn to the left and headed due south out of the cloud. The remarkable thing is that we didn't come out of the storm 90 miles away from Miami as we should have. We had traveled through 100 miles of space and 30 minutes of time in a little more than 3 minutes." Amazingly, there may be a scientific explanation for this. It wasn't caused by a time warp, but from high-energy particles flowing from the sun. Especially strong solar winds traveling at about 440 miles per second are capable of creating a disturbance in the magnetosphere, which could make one's compass become defective, which explains the disorientation Bruce experienced. Or perhaps the whole story is simply fabricated. This doesn't necessarily disprove the existence of a US secret site in the Bermuda Triangle, but it does make the idea of establishing a site in such a place a little silly. The current state of secret sites is one rife with whistleblowers and conspiracy theorists. In their defense, revelations in recent years haven't exactly built trust between the US government and its people. Now, more than ever, we're becoming extremely advanced as a species. Our technology has brought us into a state of existence that most would never have thought possible. This has given the government the tools to guard its secrets, but it has also given us the same tools to figure out what's happening. With all of this new information, it's reasonable to ask, are there any new secret sites? Well, for starters, we probably wouldn't know about many of them in their early stages of development. We usually only find a site like that after it's been around long enough to collect precious information. It shouldn't be long, though, considering agencies like the NSA plant spy hubs all over the country, including Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, LA, Dallas, Atlanta, and New York. If anything, there are probably more secret sites than ever before. An honorable mention appears to be an expanding military base in Israel's Negev desert, just 20 miles away from Gaza. Codenamed Site 512, it's been active for some time, but the recent growth is not being publicized. With rising domestic unrest, it makes sense for the US government to start looking abroad when planting new secret sites as well. Whatever the future may hold, history predating the US has shown that creating places to store vital information in the hopes of keeping it from outsiders is deep in our DNA. From Rome to the Mayans, Russia to the US, societal influence is founded on the ritualistic intent to use the truth as a weapon. For better or for worse, secret sites are here to stay. Thanks for watching. Now check out the real reason people disappear from the Bermuda Triangle, or why no one ever escaped Alcatraz Island. Thanks for watching.